episode of the Swan Rising Smart Water Professionals Mentorship Series. I'm Sandy and I'm the program manager, at Swan. So this event is being hosted by Swan, the Smart Water Networks Forum, and the Rising Smart Water Professionals. Swan is the global hub for smart water, wastewater, and stormwater sectors. And the Rising Smart Water Professionals is Swan's young professional community for those interested in joining or advancing the smart water sector. So we developed this member ecosystem that presents a snapshot of Swan's global members and represents the full spectrum of leading stakeholders in the smart water sector, from idea to pipe. We have a couple of big events coming up at Swan. We'd love if you could all join us at the 12th annual Swan Conference, taking place May 24th to 26th in Washington, D.C. We have special ticket pricing available for young professionals. And we're also pleased to announce that we have a lot of young professionals programming this year at the conference. So first up, if you're looking to upskill yourself, we're hosting a RiSWP Young Professionals coding workshop designed specifically for water professionals. The workshop is going to be facilitated by Dr. Peter Prevost of Colaban Water, and we're really excited. So that's going to be happening May 24th, the first day of the conference. Then next up, you can check out these rising stars that are making a splash on the stage at the Swan Conference. We're really excited to feature Finn Boyle from Anglian Water, Zui Zhang from Greeley and Hansen, Emma Weisford from Royal Haskoning, Samantha Sloan from United Utilities, Nina Rossiter from Bluefield Research, and Joanna Cassidy from AGS Portugal. And for those of you who are wondering how did they get on the stage, feel free to ask us about it, and maybe next year that could be you presenting on stage at the conference. Then join RiSWP and Master Meter for an exciting morning of networking with fellow RiSWPers, our wonderful mentorship team. It's going to be a really good time, lots of delicious food, great conversation, tons of professional opportunities. So, best foot forward, bring your CVs. We hope to see you all there. Then lastly, thank you to everyone who has filled out our survey so far. We've had a really, really great response. We're actually going to draw the winner of a free pass to the conference right now here live on the air. So give me just a second. Let's see, guys. And the winner is Sharon Cleavers from KWR Water. If you're here in the audience, Sharon, raise your hand. If not, we'll make sure that we reach out to you after the conference, or after the mentorship episode. So everyone, let's give Sharon a big hand. We're looking forward to seeing you at the conference. Woo, great job. So next up, I'm gonna pass it off to Billy Rayston, one of our leadership team members. Billy also is the chair of our mentorship series and the host of this great mentorship series. And Billy's going to share a little bit more with you about what's going on now at Swan and at RiSWP and some exciting opportunities we have for you.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. So as Sandy was mentioning, within Swan is RiSWP, the Rising Smart Water Professionals, and RiSWP is really what puts on this program and many other events through Swan. And that effort is led by the leadership team. We also have RiSWP ambassadors, which are 16 people from all across the globe. We have a LinkedIn group, and there's a lot of people exchanging ideas. And Sandy, next slide. It's an exciting new opportunity that there are currently openings for the RiSWP leadership team. So we're accepting nominations, and the link to that will be dropped in the chat. And so if you're interested in applying yourself, or if you want to nominate someone else, you can do that via that link. And this nomination process is going on a rolling basis. So as soon as we find a good candidate, we're going to start doing interviews and filling that position. So apply as soon as possible, because we will be doing this on a rolling basis. So definitely get those applications in as soon as you can. All right, and so I think with that, we can begin the interview. And so today we have Alan Tucker, who has a really impressive bio. So Alan is the Information Technology Program Manager for Engineering at the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, which provides wastewater and stormwater services to 1.3 million people. So he has over 15 years experience in the water sector and currently supports planning, design, construction, environmental compliance, industrial pretreatment, lab information, and operational data management. So really covering the whole spectrum there. Alan has spent his career bringing innovation into environmental organizations, which began by digitizing scientific information at the Missouri Botanical Garden, then moving into the water sector. His current work at MSD focuses on the use of digital technology to enable integrated, efficient, and sustainable water management. So he's a member of many professional organizations, including the Swan America's Research Group, the Water Environment Federation, the Missouri Water Environment Association, and the Project Management Institute, and the Geospatial Innovation Center at T-Rex. He is a certified project management professional, holds a master's degree in political science from the University of Missouri St. Louis, and a bachelor's degree in English from Montmarty College. So thank you so much, Alan, for being here. Again, such a cool resume, such an interesting background. It's just so great to have you here. Alan, I think you're on mute.
My mistake, sorry. Well, thank you very much for that nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. I love talking about this stuff, and especially I love talking to young people who are either in or interested in getting into water.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I think just to kind of get things started off, I think when most people think about water and wastewater, and maybe this is represented here on this call, they think of civil and environmental engineers. But really, that's a kind of a small slice of really what makes up the water sector. And I know you have a focus in IT and GIS. For people that aren't familiar with what those things mean, can you define what GIS and IT staff do at a utility?
Sure. Let's start with IT because it's a little bit broader concept. Commonly, we think of IT as the utility that provides information infrastructure to the organization, and typically we think of connecting the operational elements of all the various departments. So that's data, information, and wisdom of people. People are communicating over that infrastructure as well. But technology is much more than operational. It's also quite an important strategic consideration for utilities because it allows connections across departments, these departmental silos that everyone talks about. So decisions about technology can have very long-term implications, and strategic objectives that are performed in isolation typically have technological components, and for optimization into the future, it's certainly a better case if those are centered around some strategic plan.
Yeah.
Well, now I was going to go to GIS. Again, people commonly think of GIS as the app on their phone that tells them where to go, so nobody uses paper maps anymore. But at a very high level, a geospatial information system or any kind of map is a symbolic representation of the characteristics of places. In a utility, each one of those functional areas generates and manages and uses different characteristics about different places within the service area. Because, and some of those are analyzed spatially, some of them are integrated with our GIS. But because the utility is a fixed place, and assets are fixed and parcels are fixed, this location information can be the connection points, right, between the data that's in each functional area. And it can allow us then to take a holistic view of the utility and introduce geospatial analytics, to discover correlations and relationships between various factors across those silos that would not otherwise be apparent.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like, the next question I had, which was, how can GIS in IT be part of determining long-term strategy, what helping utilities along the digital transformation route? I think you already started talking about, those answers. The fact that IT and GIS are inherently these kind of like cross-departmental entities where, they're working with data, and often you can kind of layer these different data sources on top of each other and try to bring people out of their silos. So it seems like they're really well positioned to, help with digital transformation and long-term strategy. How do you get them a seat at the table? How do you get them the voice that they need at utilities?
Excellent question, and I agree with the premise that GIS and IT are a couple anyway of the areas that can cut across horizontally across those silos. But to get a seat at the table, a number of things have to be true first. First of all, it does need to be the case that GIS and IT folks are in fact champions of digital transformation. That's not always the case because people are so taxed with operational issues that sometimes it's very difficult to make time to step back and think about the big picture. Second, digital transformation introduces additional complexity into the information environment. And with that comes a lot of concerns regarding cybersecurity and data management of complex data environments. And it's not necessarily true that introducing changes into those areas is something that people on staff have expertise with. Again, because of the focus on just keeping the lights on and keeping everything secure, that may not always be the case. And then third, digital strategy probably isn't being discussed at that table now. So in order for those things to be true, it's first essential that the utility recognizes the need for those and then identifies or trains the right people to participate in them. And only then, can you have someone who rises to the level of the leadership that sits at that table and makes that strategic plan.
Great. Yeah. So it's clear, a ton about GIS, IT, the in and outs of utility, kind of the trends in digital transformation, the pitfalls. How did you get here? I mean, we mentioned that you have a degree in English in political science. How did you pivot into the water sector? And, how do you think that liberal arts education maybe sets you apart from others or enables you to do what you do?
Again, great question. Yes, I'm atypical in the industry, particularly in IT. Perhaps outside of HR or one of the other administrative departments, you won't find a lot of people with this background. I'll be brief because there's a lot of aspects to this story. First of all, college took me 5 years because I couldn't decide what to do. Started off in engineering and didn't like it. I went to education and wasn't crazy about that. And, once I got to the 5th year, I just wanted to graduate. And it turns out I had taken a lot of English classes. So that was my shortest route to graduation. So I went with that. To this day, I've only taken one college level computer science class, and that was an introduction of Fortran on an IBM mainframe. So, I'll date myself a number of times during this. The way I got into IT preceded getting into water. I got a PC in the mid 1980s. The web was invented in 1990, and then by 1994 was kind of entering general use. Well, 1994 was the year that I passed the oral exams for my PhD in poli-sci. And I got a phone call from a former colleague who was working at the botanical garden and wanted someone to do a database project over the summer. I was broke. I had 3 young children, and they were going to pay me. So I said yes. I got there and learned about the server side of the web, and recognized its potential for the garden, because the garden has an enormous repository of scientific information that everybody wanted. But prior to that, you pretty much have to go to the garden to use it. So I built up a crude website, showed it to management. They were enthused about it. They encouraged me. So I ran with it. I ran with it for 5 years. And my dreams of being a political pundit kind of slowly died on the vine because I wasn't watering it. But it's fine. I didn't look back. I left the garden briefly around 1999 to help an oil company with their Y2K effort. Got laid off about 2 years later during an IPO, bounced around as a contractor for a couple of years, did a pretty long gig for a workers' comp insurance company. And then I got another phone call from the sewer district, and they wanted someone to do a 30-day gig. I forget what I was building for them. But I liked that. They liked me. That worked out. And now it's 18 years later, and I'm still there. I started out as a developer because, I had the development experience at the garden, then became a business analyst, and then project manager, and then program manager. It's really in the program management role that I took a keen interest in strategy and digital transformation, because it afforded me the time to step back from day-to-day operational issues and think big, right? And that's critical. So yeah, my education absolutely sets me apart. I see the world through a liberal arts social science paradigm, which is quite different from an engineering or computer science or business paradigm. It's not better, it's just different. One of the key differences, though, is I have an enormously high tolerance for ambiguity. In social science, we consider correlations to be positive when anyone in a hard science would just laugh and say, that's absurd. Those aren't related at all. So yeah, that's my story.
That's great. I feel like there's anyone who gives you a month job offer, you're likely to end up there for a decade, it seems.
Yeah, it has worked out that way. Yes.
That's great. So I think it's also amazing, you have this different background than most people that end up at a water utility. You've seen a lot of different organizations. And, I know that you speak on innovation, specifically in the water sector, a lot. I guess, can you talk about a time where you've tried to innovate at an organization and were met with resistance? Or, if that happened, what would you have done differently now you have the experience?
Sure. I guess in general, innovation is always hard. Organizations always resist innovation, and as they should. Organizations evolve over time to protect their core business. They put in institutional structures to reinforce that, and any suggestion of changing any part of that established order is typically perceived as a threat, which is correct. It probably should be. So the burden is on the innovator to demonstrate that innovation is effective and that it's safe, that it does not put the current operations, the current information environment at risk in any way. So there's an extensive due diligence process for the safety security part. And the efficacy part, we typically try to demonstrate with a pilot project and convince the right people that it's worth continuing to invest in. So yeah, that's a lot of work. That's difficult. There've been a lot of times when I've tried things, whether they're innovation or not, and they don't work. And I would say in general, the thing that drives me forward is an understanding that the only constant is change. That's the thing that you have to understand about life. It's never the same from moment to moment, day to day. Every time that I failed, I guess, it's the same situation. It's me sitting in a cubicle somewhere with my head down, focused on the here, the now, trying to keep myself stationary in a place and time that I'm comfortable in. And I'm shaking my fist at the organization and the world for having the gall to change without consulting me first, because clearly I knew and know what is right, and that's not the case at all. So I would say that's the recipe for failure, across any discipline for any activity.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. So it seems like, just kind of basically just trying to keep your ear to the ground and listen to what's changing and being open to those changes yourselves. Is that kind of a way that you might sum it out?
It is ear to the ground, and most importantly, I would say, is eyes over the wall, because organizations tend to focus within their walls, and it's very easy if you limit your focus to that to not recognize, not see, not know about changes outside the wall. So get that ladder, look over the wall, climb down the other side, talk to people, find out what's going on, find out what other utilities are doing, understand your own utility, how it works, and then start thinking about whether some of what you see outside might bring value inside.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And I mean, we've been talking a lot about, what is the role of utilities in innovation? I saw you on a panel maybe a couple months ago that was about innovation in the water sector, and it was you and a bunch of people at private firms. And so, it felt like they had different experiences and different takes on innovation. Where do you see the role of innovation in the private sector for the water sector versus what the role of utilities are in sort of advancing the industry?
Okay. In my view, the role of technological innovation pretty much lies within the private sector. That's not part of the mission of utilities. Startups are especially good at that. But you have to recognize that technological change occurs at a very rapid rate, and there are gaps between the rate at which that occurs, the rate at which individuals adopt technology, and then another gap between that and the rate at which an organization absorbs that technology, and then an additional gap, and bringing up the rear is the rate at which political and societal institutions, government, et cetera, catch up to it and understand it. So the role of people in those other organizations, which include utilities, is organizational innovation, which is to discover horizontal ways to thread innovative ideas into a structured organization, and try it. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Learn something, try it again, try it again, try it again. So for in the grand scheme of things, the number of people doing each of those activities, there's a lot more of them in the organizations and in governmental institutions than there are individuals actually driving technology forward.
Great. So, I think I also want to encourage everyone to keep putting questions in the chat. Going to shift a little bit with the questions and go a little more of these less specific to you, Alan, but more generally this theme of mentorship, which kind of drives the series. Ask questions about that we asked to each of our mentors, focused on mentorship, in general mentorship advice. So the first question is, are there any things that helped you to get you where you are now in your career as a smart water professional? Are there any things that you tried that didn't help?
Well, sure. In my case, what has helped most is my education, which created or nurtured openness to ideas, openness to perspectives. I read absolutely everything, and that understanding that the constant is change. So I'm a very curious person, constantly trying to understand organization, technical advances, et cetera, from all different perspectives. What does finance really think about this stuff, and how would operations use this, and how is that different from what engineering would do, and that kind of, and what would IT's response be to it? So it's that curiosity and openness to perspectives and ideas. And what helps least, as I said, is when I've closed myself off and tried to focus very narrowly. A lot of people are really good at that. They're very good at specialization. We need people like that, lots of them, to keep things functioning. But there's a need also for people like me who think differently, who think big, who introduce the crazy ideas and test them out.
Yeah, no, I love that. Being able to be in other people's shoes, to be empathetic about how they might be something, how it might make their life harder, how it might make their life easier. I think that's something that just in all aspects of life can really pay dividends.
Absolutely. So, especially when you're talking about changing things, people will tend to resist change that's imposed on them, right? If you go to work and somebody tells you, "Oh, we're changing all of this stuff," and people kind of get their hackles up and wonder, well, what does this mean for my job? Am I going to be replaced by a machine? Are they going to outsource my department? And you get a little bit paranoid, a little bit resentful. So one of the keys is to get into people's shoes and understand the things that motivate them and keep them there, and explain to them the benefits that would accrue to them personally, more on an emotional level. Once you do that, then you've got a coalition of people who will support what you're doing.
Yeah, that's great. So, promoting innovation, but really that innovation being informed by what people actually need, not just what seems shiny and cool in the next thing, but really driving that change based on what the people in your organization would like to be changed.
Yes, absolutely. A technology that goes unused is of no value, right? You invent something really cool, it's amazing, change the world, but nobody wants it. So, okay, good for you, but you haven't accomplished really anything other than invent something great. But even perhaps worse case is when the technology gets purchased and then unused, because when a person or an organization commits resources to something that they think is really going to help them, but it doesn't, then they have this bad taste in their mouth that, oh, that innovation stuff, that's a waste of money. And they can become less likely to consider innovative ideas in the future.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. You don't want to get burned again.
No.
And, you've been talking a lot about, kind of your growth, your trajectory in your career, and, all these ideas that you formed because of that experience. But have you had people that have helped you along the way? Have you had mentors? And could you describe those mentors if they're older or younger? They can kind of be anyone.
Sure. Well, the short answer is no. I have never had a formal mentor, and had I had one, my development probably would have been much more focused, unless the mentor shared my perspective. But yes, I'll give a shout out to some people who've been particularly influential in my career and development. And the first was Peter Raven, who was the director of the Botanical Garden while I was there. He inspired my passion for the environment, and he gave me freedom to innovate. I had a grant-funded position. The grant was written in a very general way, so there was money and a lot of opportunities to do interesting things with it. So that was an exceptionally positive way to start my career in this field. And then there are a number of others. I was in theater in high school, and my theater coach gave me confidence, stand up on stage and act and sing. And that's tremendous for making a person confident. My undergraduate advisor taught me the beauty of the South Dakota prairie where I grew up. My grad school advisor taught me the magic of a good dinner party. And most importantly, my wife and family, who support me and, through all of my crazy ideas and career changes, and constantly amaze me with how wise they are. And the ones who do that the most are my grandchildren, who are all under the age of 4. It's amazing, the things that I learned from them.
I loved that. I love that answer. Just kind of this patchwork network of people, of family. That's amazing. And I feel like it also reflects, how you think about organizations. You do look at the big picture and see how it all fits together. So I thought it was a really beautiful answer.
Thank you.
So I guess last question before we get into some Q&A from the audience. So audience, feel free to start, putting questions in the chat. We'll field those. But what is the next sort of big career goal, or where are you hoping to take your career next? And what advice would you give to a mentee if they had a similar goal?
Well, I want a seat at that table that we talked about earlier, and that would enable me to expand my scope from departmental to enterprise, or perhaps even across multiple enterprises. So that's generally my goal. Anyone who wants to do the same thing, my best advice is to work at a utility for a while. Join for 3 months, stay for 5 years. Pay attention to what goes on inside. Keep your ear down and look over the wall, and try new things. You're going to fail. You're going to fail over and over and over, but learn from each time, get better at it, address the obstacles each time, figure out how it actually happens. And then you'll understand that it's not a departmental activity. It certainly can't be coming out of the IT department. The organization resists that always. So best advice, work for a utility.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Alan. This has been a really great conversation. I think now we can get started with the Q&A. So looking over the chat now, but also if people want to unmute themselves and ask questions, feel free.
Yeah, Simon Warren has a question. Simon, do you want to unmute yourself and ask? Otherwise, I can ask it too. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. I'll try not to just read my question. As a former St. Louis resident, actually former Garden employee, one of the things that you learn is St. Louis is very politically and socially divided. There's sort of a north-south divide, city-county divide, and MSD is kind of famously one organization that really serves lots of different parts. And I was just wondering, as a person with like a political science background who's now very much in the utility practice space, which should be hopefully non-political, how do you sort of navigate those divisions, and does technology and mapping and like things like citizen science help with that?
It's interesting to find another former St. Louis resident on the call. So I'll ask you where you went to high school later. So St. Louis is a regional governmental agency. It has a special charter from the state constitution. So we aren't really involved in local politics. Our coverage area includes the city of St. Louis and just about all of St. Louis County. St. Louis County has, almost 100 municipalities, and then you can overlay fire districts and school districts and all kinds of things. And you end up with a very fragmented political environment that does make public policy and governmental activities very complicated. But it doesn't affect us really terribly because we're independent from that. We have to get data from a lot of sources, from the city, from the county. Things have to be combined, reconciled, because they may not keep their data the same way. Citizen science, I think, has great promise, but that requires open data or some level of openness that's a bit further down the path than where we are.
Whoa, thanks for that. Next, we have Emily Hines. She had a question for Alan, if you want to ask him.
Hi, thank you, Alan. I just wanted to ask a question. In your experience, is it better to kind of, when you're starting off in the water industry, to try a lot of different positions and different roles, or is it better to kind of, what you mentioned, go straight to utility and stay for a few years and figuring it out from that side? Like, do you have any input on those two different kind of aspects of gaining your reputation in the industry?
I think there's value in broadening your experience, in exposing yourself to multiple perspectives, because just like with any utility where different departments have different perspectives, different sectors of the market also have very different perspectives. They're all valid, but people are motivated by different things. The better you understand the whole landscape, I think the more effective that you can be wherever it is that you work. The alternative, of course, is just to go into an organization and spend your career there. And there's also nothing wrong with that, because as I was saying earlier, the world needs specialists too.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Nice. Next we have Kedar. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. I really appreciate all the discussion on that's been great. I work as a data scientist, but what I've usually heard people say is that the water industry in general, it lags a little behind when it comes to embracing new technological advances in terms of the industry's responsiveness to using some of the latest technology, open source or not, that's out there. In your experience, is that true? And if so, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges?
Yes, it's true. Yeah. The water industry, water utilities tend to be very conservative. And I think that, from my perspective, data science, data engineering, absolutely is necessary, but it's just not on people's radar right now. And in most instances, they're just not digitally advanced enough for that to even be on the agenda. Certainly necessary, but unless the organization has a top level and almost universal commitment to a digital transformation, typically you start where you can. Maybe you're in a position to do a data science project that just works with existing data sets, and you cobble together some integrated environment and do some interesting modeling and analysis, and show people that it's valuable, and then maybe they'll fund you and let you keep going.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Samuel, you have your hand up. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for speaking with us today. My name's Sam. I'm a recent graduate from the Yale School of the Environment with a master's in environmental management and a focus on water resource management. And I am also have experience working at Swan. I was a research analyst there for about 6 months. My question kind of has two parts. The first one is, how does a young graduate, young professional, not force themselves into a position where they become like a one-skill worker, as someone who has GIS experience, data analysis experience, but also does want to apply it to a broad spectrum of challenges and solutions? How can you leverage those skills and not get funneled into doing just one thing? And then my second question is, where do you see the future of GIS in water utilities beyond just asset management?
Great. First question, the answer to that is that the burden is going to be on you. It's going to be on the individual. Job descriptions tend to be, pretty specific. They are artifacts of the organization's desire to develop repeatable processes and skill sets that pretty much comprise a punch list of things that are necessary for someone to do the position as management or somebody understands it, right? So you kind of have to meet those minimum qualifications to get a position, and I think that's true in most organizations that are of any size. But there are always opportunities. One of the things about working in an organization is that you discover very quickly that there are people who are really interested in working. They work hard and they would like to see things move forward. Those are the people you want to connect with and network with and look for opportunities to do more and different things. There's also a pretty large contingent of people who are quite happy to keep everything running and probably aren't interested in collaborating on those ideas. I've forgotten your second question. Would you repeat it?
Of course. My question was, where do you see the future of GIS in water utilities beyond asset management and kind of progressive use of it in other aspects of the utility?
Sure. So as I was mentioning earlier, GIS can allow the analysis of data from many, many sources. Of course, that requires data engineering and data science in order to get that data combined. But spatial analysis has value, can have value across the organization. One project that we worked on a couple of years ago was to spatially map data from finance. They were interested in seeing spatial patterns in delinquencies or liens on properties related to unpaid sewer bills and that kind of thing. We weren't quite there yet. We weren't able to meet some of the requirements that they had. We have 400,000 customers. And one of their requirements was they wanted initially a map to load with 400,000 points on it, which we weren't able to do, and I would argue, is of limited value. But GIS, we don't tend to think of or manage things spatially other than assets right now, but the potential is there. We have position tracking devices on all of our vehicles. There's just a lot that can be learned from understanding how things relate in space.
Thank you.
Cool. So Samuel, it's interesting that Alan brings up just asset management, because we work in the same area. I also work in St. Louis. And while Alan looks at the asset management side of it, like I use that GIS data all the time for stuff that goes beyond asset management. So like I use that information to build models of water systems. We use locations of like storm inlets that we already knew existed because of all the asset management that was going on. And we had topological data. So we could basically create drainage areas knowing those specific points exist. So if you have that base, what you can do, if you're interested, it's endless. You just need to find something useful and just do it because the data exists.
That's a good point, Jade. And I would add to that the UN in the SDG talks about transboundary issues regarding water, and that's usually presented as an international issue. But the U.S. is extremely fragmented. Watersheds span multiple political boundaries, and then they have these different jurisdictional boundaries sort of overlaid on top of those. So GIS would enable a holistic view. If you circumscribe some area, some system that you want to understand, and then add all of these layers of information on it, I think it gives a much better perspective and enables better analysis of what actually happens. Not just hydrologically, but what's going on politically and et cetera.
Thank you.
I guess I don't see any immediate questions, so it might be a good time.
Caleb has to stand up again.
Oh, there's one more? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Billy and Jade. Well, maybe to extend on that same discussion that we were having, one of the things that I've realized after spending about a year in the water industry now, and that's not true about my company, although other private companies, they have a general resentment towards open source in general. Open source, let's say machine learning technology, or even open sourcing the work that they do internally. So Alan, in your experience, is that something that's justified, and do you think that should change?
Well, I would say yes to both. Certain things I think need to remain private. I can't say proprietary because we're a government agency, and there are laws that allow essentially freedom of information requests, and then we have to turn that over unless it's contains PII. But for security reasons, mostly, it makes sense to keep some of it private. But there are many data sets that could be presented, opened, and also publicly announcing, here's this data set and here's our big business problem. Go for it, figure it out, and just provide people a challenge and a playground to see what they come up with. So this goes back to the citizen science thing we were talking about earlier. I think there's a great opportunity there, but there are significant organizational and cultural barriers to that, and I think most organizations, public organizations that are responsible for protecting the public health, are going to be somewhat reluctant to do it.
That makes total sense. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any hands. I don't see any more questions. So I think we can wrap up the Q&A. Thank you so much for your time, Alan, both for the interview and for fielding all these questions. I guess before we go, Sandy, can you just share that last slide? So first, Sandy just put a link to mentorship series feedback survey. And also, we just want to announce the next mentorship series. So if you enjoyed this one, which I'm sure everyone did, June 1st, we will be focusing on entrepreneurship in smart water. And we are going to be talking with 3 innovators, founders, Anna, Adele, and Saban, from 3 different organizations about entrepreneurship in the water sector. So again, thank you so much, Alan. Really appreciate you taking the time. And I thought it was a really engaging discussion, and you left me and everyone else with a lot to think about. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to be here. I would encourage anyone, all of you, to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way for me to get back to you. So just type in my name and water or something, and I'll show up.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me.
Alan's also going to be at the conference, so hopefully some of you will get to meet him in person as well.
Yes, I will be there all week.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. It was really, really excellent. Have a great day, everyone.